when I look at this Georgia football program that Kirby Smart has built, when it comes to recruiting the best, preparing them, developing them as players, scheming, putting it all together for game day, and then churning out these results, if they complete this 2-game run, like many of us expect them to, I don't know what they can be doing that's any better. It's the best program in college football right now.
Yeah, I think everything you want, like if you could sit down and just literally design a football team from the ground up, you'd have almost everything you want right now at UGA, to the point where it's almost going to be disappointing at this point if they don't win the national title. I mean, I think they've got the best coaching staff in football. We can have the arguments about Kirby versus any whatever head coach heads up, but as far as just total staff goes, I'll take Georgia's staff over anybody's. I'm talking about recruiting, development, coaching, play calling, across the board. I'll take Georgia's staff. The talent is obviously there, the second most talented team in the country according to the 24/7 composite talent rankings or whatever, top 3 recruiting classes almost every single year, multiple number 1 classes. It's a good time to be a Georgia fan right now. It's hard to imagine things going much better than what they've gone the last couple of years.
What was your national championship pick at the beginning of the year?
I don't really make national championship picks, but I had Ohio State as my number 1 team all off season. It changed at some point during the season, but I had them number 1 heading into the season.
So this is what intrigues me about this matchup. I know what I'm going to get out of Georgia. I would be surprised if they tripped over themselves and handed this game to Ohio State. They are just so buttoned up. They are so rock solid. The defense is the best in college football. There is no argument. The offense is better than people believe. They have a championship pedigree. They went through this run last year. They got to be just full of confidence, but still focused, still laser focused. Ohio State's the wild card in this. If they show up and they're their very best, then this could be just a classic. This could be a great, colossal, great game. But if Ohio State's not focused, if they're still doubting themselves, if they're still thinking about the NFL, whatever they're doing, they're going to get slammed upside the head by 3 or 4 touchdowns. So they are such a wild card compared to what I think Georgia is, which is a complete known factor.
Yeah, I think Ohio State, to beat Georgia, you have to throw the ball. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't know that. You're not going to run on Georgia. That's whether you're Ohio State or Alabama or whoever. I mean, no one has ran on Georgia in 5 years. It just doesn't happen. No one does it. So you have to be able to throw the ball. Obviously, Ohio State's got the weapons to do that. I mean, they've got an NFL quarterback and multiple NFL wide receivers. Having the tools to do it is not the same as doing it, though. They got to go out and do it now. I'm curious to see. Ohio State can score on Georgia. I don't think this is going to be like, Ohio State scores 6 points type of deal. That's not what I think at all. But I'm curious to see if how Georgia plays it defensively. I tend to think they're going to come at it sort of the same way they approached the Tennessee game. Georgia doesn't have great sack numbers this season, but in the games where you felt like Georgia might need to do that, they've done it. Florida, Tennessee, a couple of the other ones down the stretch. I'm curious to see if that's what they do, because it's worked when they've done that in the past against these teams that maybe they thought we were going to try to throw it on them. So we'll see. But, Ohio State's got the weapons to move the ball on Georgia, to score on Georgia. If C.J. Stroud is sitting back in that pocket, he'll pick Georgia apart. He'll pick anybody apart. And Georgia's got a good secondary. Keely Ringo's getting some, Keely Ringo's going to be the first corner taken in the draft. So take that however you want. He got picked on the last 2 weeks. The guy's been starting for 2 years. He's given up 0 touchdowns. None. 0. So, we'll see what Marvin Harrison can do.
It was the Clemson game last year that I thought, my goodness, this defense, I knew they were talented. I knew they were going to be one of the best, 3 to 4 best. But once I saw it against Clemson And then I saw it against Arkansas. Good Arkansas team can't do anything. They get shut out 37-zip. They can't even run their plays. They're not just getting stopped. They can't run the play. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the best defense I've seen in a long time. And then they carried it through, besides the blip against Bama in Atlanta, they carried it through the entire season. So obviously the big question this year is they lose the 5 first-rounders. How good are they on defense? And you bring up the Tennessee game, Lou. And that was the game where I thought, okay, they're just about as good as they were last year, because once they got that lead, Hendon Hooker didn't have a chance. Those edge rushers came off the ball and the push up the middle, and he just got the plays just got sabotaged, and he just got buried play after play after play.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference between Georgia's defense last year and this year, besides talking personnel, I mean, as a whole, Georgia's defense this year has the ability to do that to people once they get a lead. The smothering type defense, destroying plays before they start, that kind of thing. Last year's Georgia defense had to be the ability to do that from the first possession of the game. This defense overall is not as smothering as last year's defense. If you watch every Georgia game last year and every Georgia game this year, you're going to see opponents getting a lot more first downs on Georgia this year than they got last year. Very few 3-and-outs this year for Georgia relative to last year. Last year, it was a lot of 3-and-out, 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 3-and-out for opposing teams, whether you were a terrible team or a great team. A lot of 3-and-outs against the Georgia defense. You see a lot of teams this year come out, get a first down or two, get up to midfield, maybe even, and then kind of the drive stalls out and maybe you punt it away. So the defense overall isn't as smothering, but like you said, when they get a lead, it's like something. Well, they clearly have a philosophy, Georgia does, going into a lot of these games. They're happy with a 10 to 13 point lead, and then they just want to sit on you. And that's where the smothering will come in now, especially against a team like Ohio State. Let's say Georgia's up by 10 at halftime and Ohio State didn't have much success running the ball in the first half. The game is over. Because Georgia's going to come out and have every drive they have on offense is going to be 8 minutes long. Ohio State's going to get the ball twice in the third quarter, twice in the fourth quarter. The defense is going to pin their ears back, like you said, if Ohio State was unable to run the ball in the first half, and it's over. 10 points is not an insurmountable lead, generally speaking, especially for a team like Ohio State with that kind of offense. But because of what Georgia has the ability to do both offensively and defensively in the second half of games, because look, Ohio State's defense, and I'm trying not to use the word soft here because Ohio State people get really mad, but listen to me. If Georgia wants to run the ball for 3 yards on you, they're going to run the ball for 3 yards on you. There's nothing you can do. You can't stop it. And in the second half of the game, if Georgia has a lead, that's what's going to happen. It won't be 15-yard run. It will be a 3-yard run, a 4-yard run, a 3-yard run, a 5-yard run. And then you look up and 8 minutes has gone off the clock. And that's just what will happen if Georgia gets a lead. The opposite, though, is interesting, too. What if Ohio State gets a lead? Because you always, can Georgia come back from behind? Can they sling it around if they have to? This whole shootout type of deal, Well, beat LSU 50-30, which is the first game Georgia has won, by the way, in about 3 years where they've given up more than 23 points. So I don't know what that means going forward, but it used to be if you could score 24 points on Georgia, you beat them.
And you bring up the LSU game, I don't take a whole lot of stock. And I think Jaden Daniels is a good quarterback. He's not great. He's a good quarterback. And that wide receiver core is a top 5 unit in the nation. So I think some of those plays, they were legit. And at one point, that was a 35-17 game. And I think LSU was like down inside the 10 to make it a 11-point game. Like that was about the closest it got. And then Georgia turned them over and it was done. So that 500 yards passing doesn't mean a whole lot to you.
Well, I'm not happy about it. And look, this isn't a situation where Georgia, you hear a lot of, oh, well, they took the starters out, or they were playing prevent defense, or, they weren't doing this. Georgia all the starters were in. They were playing man coverage, a little bit of zone, but mostly man like they normally do. What they weren't doing is putting Nussmeier under pressure. I mean, the guy had sitting back there for 6 seconds. Georgia can't really get to the QB with 3 or 4 guys. Another difference from last year. I mean, Jalen Carter is a problem for anybody, no doubt, in the middle. but they don't have the pass rushers on the outside really that they've had in the past. But Nussmeier was sitting back there for 5, 6 seconds and picking that secondary apart. I mean, that wasn't a good second half by Georgia's secondary. And again, it wasn't a thing where, well, we had a huge lead, so we took the starters out. No, that was Keely Ringo and Kamari Lassiter and Christopher Smith and Malachi Starks back there, the 4 starters, and Javon Bullard, the nickel corner. That's who that was. And they got ate up. Now, did Georgia play exactly the same defensively in the second half as they did the first half? No. And what is it with Georgia and backup QB? Who is Ohio State's backup quarterback? Because if Ohio State wants to win, that's probably what they need to do. Put the backup in it after halftime. What is going on with Georgia? Can't win these games when these teams switch quarterbacks, can they? I mean, we beat LSU, but it was only because we had a 28-point lead before they switched QBs.
That is the history. Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird. And Nussmeier and Jaden Daniels are 2 totally different style of QBs, but really, to me, that's not an excuse because we didn't really know if Jaden Daniels was going to play. So you should have been preparing for both Nussmeier and Jaden Daniels. We know Nussmeier is a pocket passer, more of a pocket passer, and Jaden Daniels is more of a runaround guy. So 2 totally different styles, but Jaden Daniels had that ankle injury coming into the game. So you should have at least considered the possibility, hey, they might put Nussmeier in. If they do, what changes are we going to make defensively for him as opposed to Daniels? And it looked like it didn't work. I wasn't happy with it at all. I think they just played bad in the second half. I don't know why. As much as I think they played bad, I don't look forward and apply that to Ohio State in any way. Like nothing I saw in the second half against LSU makes me more worried about Ohio State. Every time Georgia has had to be locked in this season, they've been almost or looked almost unbeatable every time. I don't think because LSU threw for 250 yards or whatever it was in the second half of that game when it was over at halftime, that now means something for the Ohio State game. I just don't like that we played that bad in the second half.
So you're not like some of the people that comment to my show that want to find a chink in Georgia's armor, and they're still bringing up the Kent State game.
Yeah, right. I mean, oh my God, Georgia only beat Kent State by 17. Okay. And I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. The Kent State and Missouri games are
that's ridiculous.
Favorite.
Now the Missouri game, that makes more sense to me than Kent State.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's no excuse for that performance against Missouri. Kent State, it's at home. It's an early game. The students are still asleep, that kind of thing. I watched that game. And at not one point during the Kent State game did I think Georgia was going to lose. I thought Georgia was going to lose the Missouri game all the way up until, the 5 minutes into the fourth quarter. I actually thought Georgia was going to lose that game. And I think Georgia deserved to lose that game. I think it's just talent just won out in the end, but man, that was bad. There's no excuses for that. And the whole, and I don't like this about Kirby Smart. Everybody knows it's harder to play on the road than it is at home. But every time we lay an egg on the road, whether it's a 4-point win over Mizzou or a loss, Kirby goes on this whole thing like he just had to take his team into the Death Star to play a game. This is Missouri. No, nothing against Missouri, but it's Missouri. So if you were going to rank home field advantages in the SEC, they're a double-digit home, somewhere 11 to 14. I mean, this isn't playing at LSU at night. This isn't playing at Auburn. This isn't playing at Sanford Stadium. This isn't even playing at the other Columbia, at South Carolina. It's Missouri. Other than Vandy, it's probably the least home field advantage in the entire SEC. And Kirby overblows that deal, that kind of thing. Georgia just played bad. That's it. They played horrible in that game. Now, that was in September. It might be time. If you're an Ohio State fan and you're banking on something that happened in September as proof that you're going to win this game, try looking at the last 6 games.
That game was completely off my radar. I'm kind of like you, I'm guessing, where other than your team, you're going to watch the Georgia game. You're watching the best games and you got a lineup and priorities of who you want to see. And that was completely off my radar. We got close to the fourth quarter. I'm like, I got to watch this game. I got to see the fourth quarter. And I couldn't believe it. Locked
I
in.
was live streaming the game, and I said multiple times at halftime and into the third quarter, Georgia's going to lose. They're going to lose. They're not going to come back from this. They're going to lose. And they almost did. I mean, they didn't lead at all in that game till what, 4 minutes to go in the game or something. They deserve to lose that game. But, if you go back and you look at almost every single national title winner over the last 20 years, they have one of those games somewhere.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, I
Georgia didn't lose
try
that game.
using the Missouri game to pigeonhole Georgia is just as dumb as using the Oregon game. I
I
think.
think the Oregon game's more valid.
Well, yeah, but that's the best version you will get of Georgia. And so saying, well, we beat Oregon 49-3, so we probably beat the Buffalo Bills too. It's just as dumb as saying, well, you only beat Missouri 26-22, so probably going to lose to Ohio State by 50. Both of those things are ridiculous. Look at the body of work.
Yep.
Don't pick out the best performance or the worst performance. Look for patterns. The patterns are 40 points a game scoring and 11 points a game giving up. That's the pattern.
Yeah, I have that argument with people all the time when they try to use the transitive property, which doesn't work. But when I bring up about 8 transitive properties, then that's a resume. That you understand if there's dozens of transitive properties that we're talking about, and they're not 7 degrees away, they're 1 degree away. That's called a resume. And that's what that is. Got Uncle Lou here, folks. Appreciate him stopping by, and I can't imagine anybody's watching us that doesn't know that Uncle Lou's around. But just in case you don't, Uncle Lou, just put it in the search bar on YouTube. Check out all this great college football content. So I am guessing, I'm going to give you my take on Stetson Bennett, the Stetson Bennett phenomena. And then, of course, I want to hear from you, because I'm guessing that this has been one of the great conversation pieces for you and your channel for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So for me, Stetson Bennett, it would be tremendous to be able to run the experiment of taking his 3-star label off of him. And when JT Daniels was around, taking his 5-star label off of him, because I truly believe that most college football fans cannot just watch the games and watch the performances and make an evaluation. They just have it in their head. JT Daniels, 5-star, Stetson Bennett, 3-star. Okay, so this is what I'm watching. I'm watching a 5-star. Now I'm watching a 3-star. Therefore, we got to play the 5-star. And for a period of time, I was in that camp as well. But with Stetson Bennett, once he got some significant playing time, and I think about that Alabama game in 2020, really good game until about 10 minutes left. And he had some crucial mistakes in that game. But I thought that game and the Florida game that year, I'm watching those and I'm thinking, this guy's really good, but he makes about 2 or 3 boneheaded decisions where he thinks he's John Elway or Brett Favre, and he can throw it across his body and try to hit somebody on the other side of the field, and he does something stupid. And then he seemed to clean that up for the most part, although he made that kind of mistake against Alabama in the SEC championship game last year and made a couple near the goal line like that in the red zone where he threw that one pick. But in watching him, and especially when he's down and he's got the burden of the world on his shoulders, 4 or 5 minutes left to go against Bama, there's that controversial play where did he fumble it or did he throw it? I thought he fumbled it. Thought he was clearly hit before he released the football or brought the arm forward, much like Bryce Young in the first quarter. It seemed like the same play to me, but they called it Alabama's way. Then they called it Alabama's way. And I thought, man, this poor guy. And I got no rooting interest in the situation, but I'm thinking, this poor guy, I'm kind of rooting for him. And I thought a lot of him coming out that next drive, and they put it on his shoulders. Play action pass, boom. He's hitting some deep throws, and he leads him to the go-ahead touchdown. They win the national championship. And I think this dude, he had a lot going against him, and he gets this bad call against him. Looks like they're going to lose the national championship. He brings him all the way back, and he's already got a bit of swag about him. Like, I can do this. You almost have to come from where he's been to achieve what he has. And I thought, now that he's done this, only his physical limitations are the limitation. Other than that,
But that's a
Right?
big limitation, Mark.
He can do anything.
Those are big physical limitations are pretty
Of
big.
course they are.
Um, the two drives at the end of the national championship game were amazing, and that's probably what he'll be remembered for in 20 years. Are those two drives? He played like shit for 3.5 quarters. It was horrible. I mean, it was terrible. It was. I mean, there are no words to describe how bad it was. We had a generational defense that kept us in the game to the point where all we needed was 2 drives at the end of the game instead of an entire game's worth of drives. Thank God, because he played terrible. He's played terrible against Florida 3 years in a row. He's done a lot of good things. And when he plays well, I'm the first one to come on here and say we played great against LSU, played great against Oregon. Went to sleep for 6 weeks in the middle of, he also went 6 games without throwing a touchdown pass this year in a row. So it's what it is it's the politicization of sports now. Not that it's a political topic, but people treat it that way. They make up their mind. I'm the same way. You're not convincing them. There's people that think Stetson Bennett is Joe Montana, and there's people that think he can't complete a pass. I'm talking Georgia fans.
Mm-hmm.
Other fans can have objective opinions like you, a third party, independent observation. With Georgia fans, forget it. They either want to name their kid Stetson Bennett or they can't wait till the guy's gone. There's no in between. And people have picked their corners, and that's what it is. But as an independent observer, what's the least talented position on Georgia's offense, do you think?
Oh, it's the quarterback position.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
And should you always be looking to upgrade? If Ohio State could get a wide receiver better than Marvin Harrison, would they get him?
I believe they would. Yeah.
Yep. He's the quarterback has been the least talented player on Georgia's team every game we have played under Kirby Smart, with the exception of the games JT Daniels started. I hear you on JT Daniels. The guy's undefeated. Never lost a game. Averaged 300 a game at UGA. Never lost. Averaged 300 a game. He's the only Georgia quarterback in history with a 100 winning percentage. Never lost.
It would have been great to have seen him under fire against the best teams, though, while at Georgia. Would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah.